It's Brian Preston, the Money Guy.
Got a question from Alex. He says, how do I introduce my girlfriend into investing, credit, saving, budgeting, all those principles when her parents, this is where it gets juicy, are getting the feeling that I am controlling her finances? None of them have knowledge about finances that he knows of, so he's kind of the financial mutant mind in this situation.
Man, okay, I love this question, Brian, because you and I have had some conversations around this in the past, right? Like, I'm trying to think. Have you ever been in a situation where there was a financial decision that you wanted to make for you and your household? I don't know, like starting a business or something, and the in-laws that you were interacting with had like a different thought around that, and you had a conversation kind of going through that, right? Like, how do you get her on the same page? But also, this is family, so you don't want to like cause any rifts. You don't want to cause any divides. You don't want to cause something to be a negative that ultimately should really be a positive.
Yeah, this is and look, I've found out recently I have a lot of family that actually watches our show, so I have to be careful. So, but it's all positive. But it is interesting, and I don't know, because I know the story you're talking about. Is I know when I went and talked to my wife and I had talked, and after my dad had passed away and I'd saved up the money, I had made the decision for life purposes I was going to start my own company because I wanted to just do things differently. And we had done the homework. We had done the saving up, so we had a nest egg there to carry us through for the 3 years. Hopefully, we were going to be able to build a business during that time. But I still remember when we shared this information with my in-laws that I was about to leave a right at six-figure job to go start my own business. In their mind, because they had worked at, especially my father-in-law had worked at a utility company for to the career, point right? Is where he'd gotten the Rolex watch and everything for a career well done. They thought I was insane, and it did create some crazy pressure because you can understand my wife loves her parents and didn't want to disappoint them, especially because she had seen her parents build some success and she didn't want to feel like she was going against what had obviously created their success. But ultimately for us, it was because, we had a lot of open communication, transparency. I did a lot of, and I think, Bo, you've seen some of these now because I found them in the archives of my 3-year business plan where I actually tried to put the numbers to paper. Now, they're laughable, because once again, I have a CPA background, so it was way too conservative. But that's good. You want to be conservative when you're making a big do or die jump moment. And so we just had really good communication. And I tried to lay out the numbers as much as possible and make it really a conversation, not me mandating or pushing this down as this is what I'm doing. It was more of a dialogue as to stakeholders in this whole process of decision making, and ultimately, my wife supported it, and thank goodness, because as I've gotten older and a little more success, I've realized that some of those early decisions that seemed half crazy at the time turned out to be really good in the long term.
I think what's so great, Brian, is there was so much planning that you put into it, where clearly it wasn't that you were doing this flippant idea. Oh, I just have this dream and I'm going to go do it. So you could actually walk both your spouse as well as your in-laws through this thing of, hey, this isn't something half-baked. I've thought this through. I know what this is. I had a very different experience. I actually went into my marriage super controlling because I was the finance person. I was the one that knew how money worked. And so you better believe that before I said I do, I already had our budget built, and I knew exactly what we were going to spend in every topical category. And I went into the marriage just so excited to tell my wife where our money was going. If you want to know more about those episodes, we've got some great content from back in 2011 and 2012 where we talk about that, where we actually talk about what I thought going into marriage and what I learned after marriage. And what was so remarkable is the way that I finally got past me trying to control my wife's behavior. And basically what you're saying is, how do I not come off as controlling? Is it has to be an open dialogue. You guys have to have the conversation of, why are we making the decisions that we're making? Why is this important to us to save for the future? What are our goals? Do we want to retire? Do we want to buy a house? Do we want to move to a different part of town? Do we want to start a family? Okay, we know all of our wants. What's the best path to be able to get there? How do we put together the roadmap to get there? Well, once you start framing the conversation in that, then it's no longer controlling. It's no longer you telling the other person, do this and do this and do this. It's, hey, I've been studying Roth IRAs. It seems like that's something pretty important we should do. Let's talk about how those work. And hey, could we find in our budget a way to start maxing these things out? You'll be amazed when you start having conversations like that. It goes away from control, and now it's two people collectively working towards a common goal, but you have to be willing to be wrong. In my circumstance, I had to be willing to concede my wife was not going to use Suave $2 shampoo. It was just not what was going to happen in our household, and that was okay, because one of her goals was to use nice shampoo, and we had to be okay with that. And so it wasn't the $2 Suave that we ended up going with.
Alex, I'll just this is a little more mentorship advice on being somebody who's been married for 24 years. Family's hard sometimes. So just make sure any type of communication you do, especially with in-laws, that it comes from a position of love. Because I think what you don't want to create is an adversarial relationship where you're trying to essentially throw tomatoes at your in-laws so that you can win your significant other over to your side. Because I find that, remember, it's back to that 77% of our clients are optimists. Yep. You need to come from a positive standpoint, because I just don't want to, because you want family, because life is short, and you want to always try to keep things in a really good way, because you'll reach these hard things. I mean, there's so many things in my own marriage where which holiday do you go to, which house, there's a lot of dynamics that happen with family that if you can try to stay positive with it, I think you'll be very well served, because I think sometimes the adversarial thing seems like the easy path to create some type of wedge, and then nudge them over to your side. But just have a lot of grace and realize that, love is ultimately the thing that's keeping all this thing going. So focus on being on the positive side. If you create win-lose scenarios, you open yourself up for loss. If you create win-win scenarios, worst case scenario, you still win, right? Go read How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's a great book to help with that mindset. Solid.